The unexpected war. The galaxy had always seen Earth as a small, insignificant planet. It had no advanced technology, no great military power, and was far from any important galactic center. The Galactic Empire looked down on humanity, treating them like nothing more than an afterthought. They often laughed at Earth's attempts to rise, believing the humans to be weak, incapable of standing up to the might of the Empire. But they were wrong. So wrong. It all started with a child. A child whose name no one would ever remember, but whose death would echo throughout the galaxy. The child had been visiting a peaceful colony on the outer rim of the Empire's territory. It was a simple colony, humble, with no great significance to the Empire. But the soldiers of the Empire didn't care about that. They saw the humans on this planet as nothing more than animals to be controlled, a race of insignificant beings with no future. They came to make a point, to remind the galaxy who was in charge. The child had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. It wasn't anything personal. The child had witnessed too much, heard too much, and was a threat to their operation. Without warning, the soldiers executed the child in front of the terrified villagers. It was a cold, calculated move meant to silence any witnesses and show their power. The soldiers left the colony with no remorse. They didn't even think twice about the life they had taken. To them, it was just another dead human, one less insignificant soul in the universe. They left the area in silence, not realizing that they had just ignited a fire that would burn the Empire to its core. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. A child was dead, killed by the hands of the Galactic Empire. And humanity, ordinary humans, felt it deeply. Anger, grief, and an overwhelming sense of injustice spread across the planet. For the first time, Earth's leaders realized that their people weren't just angry. They were ready. Humanity had long been underestimated. Earth had been building something for decades, a secret that no one, not even the most powerful galactic beings, could have known about. The death of the child sparked something deep within the people of Earth, something ancient and powerful. A council was called to meet in the United Nations building. The leaders of Earth sat together, some calm, others burning with rage. They looked at each other, and they knew what needed to be done. No longer would they stand idly by. No longer would they allow the Empire to walk all over them. "This is our moment," one of the leaders said, his voice filled with both fury and determination. "We have been preparing for this day for years. The time to act has come." Across the planet, the message was sent. Every corner of Earth was buzzing with the news, and it wasn't just the leaders who were preparing for what came next. Ordinary people, scientists, engineers, and builders who had worked for years in secret began to assemble. Earth's ancient warships were about to be awakened. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake. Deep underground, in hidden bases and forgotten military facilities, the ships of Earth's past began to come to life. These ships were no ordinary vessels. They were massive, old, and powerful, dreadnoughts that had been designed long before the Empire even existed. They had been left to gather dust, forgotten in time. But now, they would serve a new purpose. As Earth's leaders watched the systems boot up, their hearts filled with a cold, calculating fury. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message to the Empire. A message that would resonate across the galaxy. The time of humans being insignificant was over. Earth wasn't a backwater planet anymore. Earth had power, and it was going to show the galaxy what that meant. The first dreadnought lifted off from Earth's surface, its engines roaring to life. The sound was deafening, shaking the very atmosphere of the planet. Then, one by one, 500,000 ships began to awaken, engines humming, weapons systems primed. These ships, built with technology older than most civilizations in the galaxy, were ready for war. The Galactic Empire, thousands of light years away, was still unaware of what was coming. They had no idea that the humans had prepared for something like this. They were still too busy laughing at the idea of humanity being a threat. But that would change quickly. As the Dreadnoughts began their journey through the stars, the Empire received word of the human response. At first, they laughed. "What are a few old ships going to do?" they mocked. "Do they really think they can challenge us?" But then the reports came in, fleet after fleet of dreadnoughts, each one more massive than the last, moving toward the Empire's territory. The Empire's confidence began to shake. These weren't just ships. These were the remnants of Earth's forgotten strength, the vessels of an ancient human civilization that had once been powerful enough to fight back. And now, they were here. And the Empire wasn't ready. The first wave of dreadnoughts reached the outskirts of the Empire's domain, their weapons powered up, ready to strike. The Empire's fleet was vast, but the humans had the advantage of surprise. And then the first dreadnought fired. The beam of energy that shot from its cannon was so bright that it lit up the dark void of space, cutting through the heart of the Empire's outer defenses. The message was clear. Earth was not to be underestimated. The Empire was about to learn a painful lesson: the rise of humanity's fleet. The news of Earth's retaliation spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy, carried by the countless communication channels and interstellar signals. At first, many dismissed it. A few old human warships. Ridiculous. The Galactic Empire had crushed civilizations far stronger than anything Earth could ever hope to produce. But the Empire had underestimated something crucial: the will of humanity. As the first wave of Earth's 500,000 dreadnoughts advanced through the vast expanse of space, the Empire's outer defense fleets began to stir, their sensors picking up the strange readings. Something was coming. Something big, something unlike anything they had ever faced before. The Galactic Empire's high command was quick to act, calling an emergency meeting in the grand, opulent hall aboard their flagship. Leaders from across the Empire gathered, watching the unfolding events with a mixture of disbelief and fury. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were not supposed to be a threat. They had long been dismissed as nothing more than a weak, primitive species. And yet, here they were, growing stronger, fighting back, and forcing the Empire to take notice. The Empire's commanders were frantic, sending ships in every direction to intercept Earth's dreadnoughts, but the human fleet was already too far into their territory. What the Empire didn't know was that Earth had been building these ships for decades, hiding them from the prying eyes of the galaxy. The dreadnoughts weren't just old, they were powerful, armed with advanced weaponry and technology that the Empire had never even dreamed of. The first few skirmishes along the Empire's outer rim were disastrous for the galactic forces. The Empire's ships were sleek, fast, and advanced, but they were not built to withstand the sheer firepower of Earth's ancient warships. Earth's dreadnoughts, massive and intimidating, fired their weapons with precision, cutting through the Empire's outer defenses like paper. On the Empire's flagship, the leaders were now speaking in hushed, panicked voices. "This cannot be happening," one of the generals muttered, his eyes scanning the reports. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them. How is this possible? These humans shouldn't be able to do this." A captain in the back of the room spoke up, his voice filled with urgency. "Sir, we've intercepted transmissions from their fleet. They're not only armed with powerful weapons, they're coordinated. It's as if they've been preparing for this moment for centuries." The general's face went pale as the realization hit him. The humans had not only built these ships, they had perfected them. And now, they were using their secret advantage against the Empire with devastating effect. Meanwhile, aboard one of Earth's dreadnoughts, the atmosphere was tense, but there was no fear. The crew, made up of humans from every corner of the planet, were focused on their mission. They had been preparing for this moment for decades, and now it was finally here. They were fighting not just for revenge, but for their survival and for the future of humanity. Captain Aidan Graves, the commander of the dreadnought Titan's Wrath, stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The human fleet was advancing, and they were cutting a path straight through the Empire's defenses. "Target the next wave," he ordered. "We need to hit them hard." The crew responded without hesitation. The massive ship's cannons powered up, and in a split second, a devastating beam of energy shot out, obliterating the Empire's battle cruiser in its path. The shockwave was felt throughout the galaxy, sending ripples through the Empire's forces. The fleet had only just begun its assault, and already the Empire was struggling. Earth's warships were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The Empire had never expected to face such an organized, relentless force from a species they had deemed insignificant. At the heart of the Empire's command, a voice of panic was beginning to rise. This is not a skirmish anymore. These humans are serious. They've already breached our first line of defense. We need to stop them before they reach the core systems. But it was too late. The Dreadnoughts, with their unmatched firepower and experienced crews, were unstoppable. Earth was no longer the weak, vulnerable planet that the Empire had mocked. The warships, once thought to be relics of a forgotten era, had awakened to take their place in history. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear to the Empire. They had made a grave mistake. They had killed one human child, but in doing so, they had awakened an unstoppable force, a force that would not stop until justice had been served. Humanity's fleet continued to push forward, and as it did, the question echoed across the galaxy. Could the Empire withstand the fury of Earth's wrath, or was this the beginning of the end for the Galactic Empire? The battle for the Outer Rim. The once feared Galactic Empire, now on the defensive, scrambled to respond as Earth's dreadnoughts relentlessly advanced. The Empire's Outer Rim, a sprawling region that had been conquered and held without challenge for centuries, was suddenly under siege. In the cold expanse of space, ships burned, destroyed by the overwhelming firepower of humanity's warships. The Empire's arrogance was crumbling with each passing moment. Admiral Karen Thal, one of the Empire's most respected commanders, stared out at the vastness of the galaxy from her command center aboard the flagship Dominion. Her thoughts were chaotic. The fleet she had spent years building was being shattered. Her empire, once invincible, was now being forced to retreat. "Report," she barked, her voice sharp with urgency. The communication officer quickly fed her the latest updates, the flashing red lights signaling a catastrophic situation. "Admiral, the 6th and 9th fleets have been obliterated. We have lost contact with the 4th. Our remaining forces are scrambling to regroup, but Earth's dreadnoughts are cutting through them like a knife through butter." Admiral Thal clenched her fists, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. How is this possible?" she muttered, her voice shaking with both frustration and fear. These humans, they should have been easy targets. What happened to their supposed weakness? She had underestimated Earth, and now she was paying the price. The humans' fleet was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. The dreadnoughts were not just relics of an old war. They were living symbols of humanity's resilience, built to withstand and counter the Empire's advanced technology. Across the galaxy, Earth's fleet continued its push toward the Empire's heart. The fleet's coordinated strikes were devastating. Each dreadnought, though ancient, was equipped with advanced weaponry, and the crews aboard them were trained to fight with a single, relentless purpose: to make the Empire regret underestimating them. On the bridge of the dreadnought Titan's Wrath, Captain Aidan Graves stood firm, staring at the vast expanse of space ahead. His crew worked in perfect synchronization, their eyes glued to their screens, their hands moving in practiced harmony. The ship's weapons were locked and loaded, ready for the next wave of Empire ships. "Captain, the 5th Imperial Fleet is closing in." They'd formed a blockade, the tactical officer reported. "They're preparing to engage." Graves nodded, his face unyielding. "Prepare to engage. Focus fire on their lead vessels. We don't have time for a prolonged battle." The dreadnoughts were closing in. The first exchange of fire lit up the dark expanse of space, streaks of energy crisscrossing the void. The Empire's ships, sleek and fast, darted around the slower-moving dreadnoughts, but they were not prepared for the precision and devastation the humans brought to bear. "Take them down," Captain Graves commanded. His voice was calm but filled with determination. The Titan's wrath unleashed a massive barrage, the sheer force of the weapons ripping apart the lead Empire ships. The Empire's fleet fought back, but it was clear. They were no match for the humans' overwhelming firepower and strategy. The tides of battle were turning, and with every shot fired, the Empire's once unshakable dominance faltered further. Meanwhile, on the Empire's flagship Dominion, Admiral Thal watched in horror as her fleet was crushed. Her eyes darted between her screens, trying to find a solution, but there was none. Earth's dreadnoughts were simply too powerful, their crews too skilled. "We cannot win this battle," she said under her breath, her voice full of dread. This is impossible." But even as the situation grew more dire, the Empire was not ready to admit defeat. They had one last hope, a secret weapon they had been building in the shadows. The superweapon known as the Abyssal Cannon, a weapon capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single blast. But there was a catch. The Abyssal Cannon could only be fired once, and its targeting system could not lock onto the humans' dreadnoughts due to their unpredictable movements and advanced stealth tech. The Imperial fleet commanders were in a panic. "Activate the Abyssal Cannon," one of the officers suggested. "We'll destroy their entire fleet in one blow." Admiral Thal hesitated, her eyes darting between the destruction around her. The Abyssal Cannon was a weapon of last resort, a tool of desperation, but it was their only option left. With a sharp nod, she gave the order. "Do it." Meanwhile, back on Earth's side, Captain Graves stood in front of the viewport, watching the ongoing battle unfold. He knew the Empire would not back down easily. They were ruthless, and their desperation would lead them to use any means necessary. "Prepare the secondary shields," Graves ordered. "They're going to try something big. Everyone, stay alert." The battle raged on, but now there was a new sense of tension in the air. The Empire's desperation was palpable. Earth's forces were gaining ground, but it was clear that this fight would not end until one side was completely destroyed. The Empire's final weapon was about to make its appearance, and it would be a game-changer. Or would it? The Empire's last hope. As the battle raged on across the Outer Rim, the once unstoppable Galactic Empire found itself teetering on the brink of collapse. The human dreadnoughts, their power and precision unmatched, were pushing the Empire's forces back, ship by ship. The Empire had never faced a foe like this. The dreadnoughts were relentless, their crews unyielding, and every strike made by Earth's fleet was like a hammer blow to the heart of the Empire. Admiral Karen Thal stood at the heart of her flagship, the Dominion, her face grim. Despite the ferocity of the Empire's military might, their fleets were being systematically destroyed. Her fleet was falling apart. Her command was slipping away. She felt the weight of every loss, every explosion that signaled another Imperial ship being lost to the humans. "We can't hold them off much longer," Thal muttered under her breath. The Abyssal Cannon was their last hope, and it had to work. There was no other option. On the bridge, the communication officer spoke, breaking the tense silence. "Admiral, the Abyssal Cannon is ready to fire. Targeting systems locked onto the lead human dreadnought. We're preparing the first blast." Thal's heart pounded in her chest. The Abyssal Cannon was a secret weapon, a project years in the making. Its purpose was simple, a single devastating blast capable of wiping out entire fleets. It had been designed to crush humanity's last resistance. Now, all they needed was to fire it, and hope that it would tip the scales in the Empire's favor. "Fire," Thal commanded, her voice filled with cold resolve. The Abyssal Cannon powered up, the entire flagship shaking as energy built to an unimaginable level. A high-pitched hum filled the air, a signal that the weapon was preparing to discharge its deadly payload. The crew watched in silent anticipation, knowing that the fate of the Empire, and possibly the galaxy, depended on the success of this weapon. In the vastness of space, Earth's dreadnoughts continued their assault. Captain Aiden Graves stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath, watching the battle unfold. His eyes narrowed as he analyzed the Empire's movements. "They're preparing something big," he muttered. "Stay alert. Whatever it is, we need to be ready." Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the Empire's flagship, the Dominion. The first blast from the abyssal cannon tore through space, a massive beam of energy that illuminated the void. It was the Empire's answer to the humans' devastating power. The blast raced toward the Dreadnoughts, its destructive force overwhelming. The first human ship in its path, the Vanguard, was hit directly. The Dreadnought shuddered violently, and alarms blared throughout the ship. "Hull integrity at 70%, the damage control officer reported. "We've lost the port side shields." The blast did significant damage. But Captain Graves, ever the strategist, was prepared. "Redirect power to the secondary shields. Get us moving. Now." The Vanguard surged forward, narrowly dodging the second wave of fire from the abyssal cannon. The weapon had proven to be deadly, but it was not unstoppable. The Titan's Wrath, along with other dreadnoughts, quickly adjusted their trajectories, evading the Empire's massive beam of destruction with calculated maneuvers. Admiral Thal watched in horror as the first wave of the abyssal cannon failed to land a decisive blow. The humans had adapted too quickly. She slammed her fist down on the console in frustration. "This can't be happening," she hissed. "How are they avoiding it? The abyssal cannon is our ultimate weapon. It should have been enough to end this." But even as she screamed in frustration, the humans were already regrouping. Earth's dreadnoughts were agile, their crews skilled in the art of war. They had expected a weapon like the abyssal cannon, and they were ready to counter it. Back on the Titan's Wrath, Captain Graves issued orders with cool precision. "We can't afford to give them another shot. Take out their power grid. We've already bought some time, but we need to finish this." The dreadnoughts fired in unison, their weapons unleashing waves of energy that targeted the Empire's most vulnerable points. The Dominion shuddered under the relentless barrage. Explosions rocked its hull, and smoke poured from damaged sections. The Empire's flagship was faltering, but Thal wasn't ready to give up. "Activate the secondary charge," she ordered. "If we can't stop them now, we'll unleash everything we have left." The Empire had one last trick up its sleeve. The abyssal cannon had a secondary mode, one even more destructive than the first. But it required an incredible amount of energy, enough to drain the Dominion's core and leave the flagship vulnerable. "We don't have much time," the officer warned. "Firing the secondary charge will leave us open to their attacks." "Do it," Thal said, her voice unwavering. "We have no choice now." As the secondary charge powered up, the Empire's remaining forces held their breath. This was it, the final weapon, the last chance to crush humanity's resistance. Captain Graves, watching from the Titan's Wrath, knew the danger that the Empire's final weapon posed. He had to act fast. "Brace for impact," he shouted to his crew. "Full power to the shields. This is the final push." The seconds stretched on, the tension building to an unbearable level. Both sides were preparing for the ultimate confrontation. The abyssal cannon was ready, and Earth's dreadnoughts were poised to strike back. The reckoning. The deep silence of space was shattered by the hum of the abyssal cannon. The massive weapon, now fully charged and aimed at Earth's fleet, held the power to erase entire dreadnoughts in a single strike. Admiral Thal watched the readout on her console, her fingers trembling slightly as the countdown began. "Firing in 5, 4. The voice of the tactical officer was strained, yet steady. 3, 2, 1. With a deafening roar, the abyssal cannon fired. A brilliant, searing beam of energy cut through space, faster than light, heading straight for the heart of the human fleet. It was the weapon of last resort, and Thal could feel the weight of everything riding on this moment. But Captain Aiden Graves, standing at the helm of the Titan's Wrath, had anticipated this moment. His fingers flew over the controls as he barked orders at his crew. "Deploy all decoys. Full evasive maneuvers," he shouted. His calm in the face of the Empire's ultimate weapon was the hallmark of his training, and his crew followed his lead without hesitation. The human fleet scattered, a swarm of ships moving in every direction to confuse the targeting systems of the abyssal cannon. The beam, fast and powerful, smashed into the void where the Titan's wrath had just been. But Graves' ship had already slipped away, barely avoiding the destructive power of the blast. "That was too close," Graves muttered under his breath, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his command chair. But they had survived the first strike. He had hoped for more time, but the Empire wouldn't give it. He could see the Dominion, still in the distance, gearing up for another blast. "Reinforce the shields. Target their generators," Graves commanded, his voice sharp. The abyssal cannon would charge again, and they needed to stop it before it could fire once more. Meanwhile, on the Dominion, Admiral Thal was livid. Her flagship had failed to land a decisive blow. The human ships were quicker, more unpredictable than anything she had ever encountered. The abyssal cannon had failed to deliver the crippling strike she had hoped for, and now the situation was slipping beyond her control. "We've lost the port generators," the officer yelled. "We can't recharge the cannon in time." Thal clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing in a mix of frustration and resolve. She would not lose. Not like this. Not when she was so close to victory. She turned toward her second-in-command. "Prepare the backup fleet," she ordered. "We'll hit them with everything we have. If the abyssal cannon can't finish them, we'll make sure the humans know the full might of the Empire." On the Titan's wrath, Captain Graves knew that the humans were running out of time. The Empire's forces were regrouping, preparing for another offensive. They were ready to unleash their final fleet. "We need to push them back. Take out the Empire's reinforcements before they can join the fight," Graves decided. "Every dreadnought we take down brings us one step closer to victory." The Titan's wrath and its fleet of dreadnoughts surged forward, guns blazing, a storm of fire and destruction aimed at the approaching Imperial fleet. The human warships fought with a fierce determination that sent waves of shock through the Empire's ranks. But the Empire was not defeated yet. As the backup fleet entered the fray, Thal's voice rang out across the bridge of the Dominion. "All ships, full assault. We fight until the last ship is destroyed." The space battle intensified, with every ship unleashing its weapons in a desperate clash of firepower. But even with their sheer numbers, the Empire's ships were beginning to falter. The dreadnoughts of Earth proved to be far more resilient than anyone had predicted. A sudden explosion rocked the Dominion. The damage was catastrophic. Thal staggered, gripping the console for support, her heart pounding in her chest. The Dominion was listing to one side, its massive hull buckling under the weight of repeated blows. "This is it," Thal whispered to herself, her voice breaking. She had led the Empire to the brink of total annihilation, and now she was watching it collapse before her eyes. Despite the chaos, the humans pressed forward. Graves knew this was their moment. The Dominion was weakening. The Empire's last hope was crumbling, and there was no turning back. They had won the battle, but not yet the war. "Get the fleet into position," Graves ordered. "We're going to finish this." The final wave of human dreadnoughts prepared to unleash their full firepower on the Empire's flagship. The time had come to bring the Dominion to its knees. As the dreadnoughts aligned for the final assault, Graves' thoughts were clear. This was not just a battle for Earth, it was for humanity's future. A victory here would send a message across the galaxy: never underestimate humanity. In the heart of the Empire's flagship, Admiral Thal looked out across the battlefield, her expression one of both awe and despair. The humans had proven themselves, and now there was only one thing left to do: face the consequences of underestimating them. As the final attack from the human fleet struck, the Dominion exploded in a shower of fire and debris, marking the end of the Galactic Empire's reign. The battlefield fell silent, save for the debris floating in the cold void of space. The Empire's fall. The battlefield was a scene of utter devastation. Wrecked ships, drifting debris, and the eerie silence of space filled the void after the massive explosion that had obliterated the Dominion. A few Imperial ships still remained, but their resolve was shattered. The once proud fleet, so certain of its dominance, now looked broken and vulnerable. Captain Aidan Graves stood at the helm of the Titan's Wrath, his eyes scanning the wreckage of the Empire's flagship. He had led the charge, pushing the humans to their limits, and now the victory was within their grasp. Yet even as his crew cheered, Graves could feel the weight of what had been achieved. "Admiral Thall's fleet is retreating," reported Lieutenant Daniels, his voice taut with exhaustion. "Their ships are trying to regroup, but it's clear they've lost their will to fight." Graves nodded slowly. "Don't let your guard down. They may retreat, but they'll regroup soon enough. The Dominion may be gone, but the Empire will try again. We need to ensure they don't get the chance to." On the communications deck, an officer looked up with a frown. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's from the Imperial High Command." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Patch it through." The crackling sound of the transmission was followed by the voice of an unknown figure. "This is High Command. We know the Dominion is lost, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. The Empire will never kneel to humanity. You may have destroyed one flagship, but the Empire's vengeance will be swift and brutal." Graves gripped the edge of his chair. "We've heard enough of this threat. The Empire may be powerful, but it is also arrogant. We've beaten them once, and we will do it again if we have to." The voice on the other end laughed darkly. "You think this is over? The Empire has many weapons. You've destroyed a symbol, but we have more. 1,000 times more. You think Earth can stop what's coming?" Graves' resolve hardened. "We've already stopped you once. I don't think you understand how determined we are. You'll never crush humanity's will. Not today. Not ever." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a lingering sense of dread in the air. The tension was palpable as the crew awaited Graves' orders. "Get ready for the next phase," Graves said, his voice quiet but steady. "The Empire is far from finished, but they just learned that they can't break us." As the fleet turned to regroup and strategize, the full scope of what they had accomplished began to settle in. The defeat of the Dominion was a victory, but it was also a warning shot to the Empire, a message that Earth and its people would not go down without a fight. Admiral Thall, in the last remaining stronghold of Imperial power, was no longer the confident leader who had once looked down on humanity. She now faced a new reality. The humans were not the naive, defenseless species she had thought them to be. Their power, their resilience, their willingness to fight back, it was all too much for the Empire to ignore. Her flagship, the Dominion, now lay in ruins, a symbol of the Empire's failure. She stood alone in the wreckage, her hands trembling as she stared out at the vastness of space. The Empire had underestimated Earth, and now it would have to face the consequences. "Retreat," she murmured to herself. "We'll live to fight another day." But as she gave the order to retreat, she knew something had changed. The Empire, for all its might, had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the humans. They had underestimated the resolve of a species that would never give up, no matter how hopeless the odds. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread like wildfire. Humanity, united by the threat of annihilation, had faced the most powerful force in the galaxy and won. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a triumph of the human spirit. The message was clear. Earth would not be conquered. Not today. Not ever. But as the celebrations roared across the planet, there was one question that lingered in the minds of humanity's leaders. What would the Empire do next? The war was far from over. The Empire's arrogance had been shaken, but its thirst for power had not been quenched. The Titan's Wrath and its fleet of Dreadnoughts had delivered a resounding blow, but this was only the beginning. The final confrontation between the human forces and the Empire was still to come. Graves knew this all too well. As the dust settled on this battlefield, another one loomed on the horizon, far larger and far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. "The real war is just beginning," Graves said, looking out over the fleet. "We've won the first round, but we need to stay vigilant. The Empire won't give up so easily." And with that, the humans prepared for whatever the Empire would throw at them next. Their resolve was unbroken. The Galactic Empire had fallen, but the war for humanity's survival was far from over. The final confrontation. The silence of space stretched across the vast reaches of the galaxy, the remnants of the Imperial fleet floating like forgotten corpses. But the victory that the human fleet had claimed was far from final. The Empire, bruised and battered, still had power, and the galaxy was still vast. The upcoming battle would decide the fate of the entire universe. Captain Aidan Graves stood before the war room's massive holographic display. His fleet, the 500,000 dreadnoughts that had shocked the Galactic Empire, now sat in formation, waiting for the next orders. It had been weeks since the destruction of the Dominion, and there was no sign of the Empire's retreat. In fact, the signs pointed to something much worse. "They're gathering forces, Captain," said Lieutenant Daniels, his voice tight with concern. "We've intercepted communications. The Empire's preparing for a full-scale counteroffensive. They're bringing in their last reserves. Their flagship, the Eternal Emperor, is fully operational." Graves clenched his fists. The Eternal Emperor was no ordinary ship. It was the most powerful warship in the Empire's entire fleet, a vessel of unimaginable power. If the Empire was going to make a final stand, this was their weapon of choice. "We'll show them what happens when they mess with Earth," Graves said, his voice cold with resolve. "This ends today." Across the command center, the mood shifted. The crew had seen the destruction the Empire was capable of, but they had also witnessed the power of human ingenuity and resolve. The victory over the Dominion had already proven that Earth would never bow to the Galactic Empire. Now, it was time to finish what had been started. On Earth, the situation was equally tense. The leaders of every nation, every organization, watched the coming confrontation with bated breath. There were no more secrets, no more hiding. The fate of their world rested on the shoulders of those in space, facing down the wrath of the Empire. In the Capitol, President Sarah Hawkins stood in front of a large screen, watching the live transmission of the battle. The weight of the world was on her shoulders, but she knew one thing for certain: the humans would fight with everything they had. They had to. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "We either win this war, or we lose everything." The battle began at dawn. In space, the human dreadnoughts moved into position, their weapons ready. The Eternal Emperor came into view, a massive black shape looming against the stars. The ship radiated power, and its mere presence sent shivers down the spines of those who faced it. "We've fought battles before, but this is the one that matters," Graves said, addressing his crew through the comms. "Everyone knows what to do. No matter what happens, we hold the line." The first volley of shots erupted as the two fleets collided. The Empire's flagship fired first, its massive cannons charging up with terrifying energy. The dreadnoughts of the human fleet scattered, but they were ready. Human ships unleashed a hailstorm of fire, their weapons lighting up the void of space in a dance of destruction. Graves guided his ship into the heart of the battle, his eyes never leaving the Eternal Emperor. The two ships exchanged fire, massive explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space. Each shot was a gamble, one that could cost them everything. As the battle raged, the tide began to turn. The human ships were relentless, using every tactic they had learned over the last few months to outmaneuver and outfight the Imperial fleet. The Empire had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, and now they were paying the price. "We've breached their shields," Daniels shouted from his station. "The Eternal Emperor is vulnerable." Graves didn't hesitate. "Take us in. Full speed ahead." With a roar, the Titan's wrath surged forward, its weapons at full power. The crew held their breath as the ship charged toward the Empire's flagship, every second drawing them closer to what could be a final confrontation. Inside the Eternal Emperor, Admiral Thal, the once proud leader of the Empire's fleet, gritted her teeth in fury. No, this can't be happening. We will crush them. But the humans had already proven time and time again that they were not to be underestimated. Their determination, their unity, their ability to adapt, they had broken the Empire before, and they were on the verge of doing it again. As the Titan's wrath and the Eternal Emperor collided, the final battle of the war began. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the two Titans clashed, their weapons roaring, and the stars themselves seeming to tremble in response. For hours, the battle raged on, neither side willing to give up. But slowly, the human fleet began to overpower the Empire's remaining forces. One by one, Imperial ships fell, their shields crumbling beneath the relentless assault of the Dreadnoughts. Admiral Thal, realizing the inevitability of the loss, gave one final order: retreat. But it was too late. The Eternal Emperor exploded in a massive flash of light, signaling the end of the Empire's reign. As the dust of battle settled, Graves and his crew surveyed the wreckage. The Imperial fleet had been wiped out, the Empire's final hopes dashed. The victory was hard-won, and though it came at great cost, it was a triumph for humanity. "We did it," Lieutenant Daniels whispered, disbelief in his voice. Graves stood tall, his face grim but resolute. "This is only the beginning. The galaxy will never forget the day Earth struck back. But we must stay vigilant. There are always new threats, new dangers, and humanity will be ready." The war was over, but the story of humanity's strength, determination, and courage would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. And so, with the Empire's fall, the dawn of a new era began, an era where humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question.